Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Jeff Copeland about Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn. Hi, Jeff. Welcome.
Hey, Dan. Thank you so much for having me and for wanting to chat about the book. It's an honor.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you reaching out to me as well. You know, occasionally somebody asked me yesterday how I find authors. I say some find me, some I find, some come through a publicist. So Jeff reached out to me, and I will tell you. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this up. There's so many things about Holly Woodlawn I did not know. So I began to see Andy Warhol movies from the late 70s forward. So I had not seen his earlier work. I think I've seen part of one of them, but it's funny. So I knew Holly Woodlawn's name, but full disclosure, I didn't know what the Lou Reed song meant at all. Didn't realize any of the people he talked about were famous people that I knew tangentially. So as a way to start, why don't you tell the audience who Holly Woodlawn was?
Well, Holly was she was an Andy Warhol film star. She was transgender, and she, as a 15-year-old boy, ran away from Miami, Florida, and hitchhiked to New York City. And Lou Reed sings about that in Walk with the Wild Side. You know, Holly came from Miami, FLA, and such. And then he sings about Jackie Curtis and Candy Darling and a few others. So she's a pop culture, It
was. And so, it's funny. I'm going to relate it to Blondie's Rapture, because in that she mentions a lot of people in the underground New York scene at the time that she first got there. Because there's an artist and a DJ, and she mentions those in the song Rapture. And Lou Reed talks about real life people. And when I was listening to it yesterday on the drive home from work, I was like, wow, that's racy. I mean, some of the lyrics are really racy. And I'm like, oh, okay, then I like that. So, I think Lou was way ahead of his time.
Oh my gosh. And I think it went over everybody's head, obviously.
I think so, because having grown up in Eastern North Carolina in a very conservative place, I actually remember hearing that song in the 70s. And I'm like, wow. There's some songs I can sing along with. I have no idea what the lyrics are. Yesterday, I was really listening to the lyrics, and I'm like, oh, okay, there is Holly. He talks about Holly, he talks about Candy, and I'm like, all righty then. But talks about Candy very directly, and I'm like, oh, okay, I love that.
Yeah. An interesting note about Debbie Harry is Debbie Harry was a waitress at Max's Kansas City, where Holly would hang out. And Holly and Debbie were actually part of a band called Pure Garbage.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. Holly, I think, left the band, and then Debbie Harry came in. They were all running in the same circles.
Yeah. It's so I did hear Debbie tell a story which is way off topic, but one night, is it John Bundy? Is that his name? No, Ted Bundy pulled up. She was walking home from a club in the East Village, and Ted Bundy's limousine pulled up, and he begged her to get in the car because it was cold and he'd give her a ride. And she said she felt uneasy in his presence and refused to get in the car. And it's a good thing she didn't, because we might never have heard of her ever.
Right. I've never heard that story. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so I think a lot of the people who lived during Holly's time with Andy, in New York especially, were living in a heady time. It was after the 60s. Right. And it was a time where there was all of this natural talent bubbling to the top, to the surface, without a lot of ways to express themselves. And I think Andy did such a great job in collecting these people at the factory and made for somebody like Holly a lifelong public figure.
Yeah, she's kind of like a pop culture almost icon. I mean,
Yes.
and but Holly, when I got to know Holly, it was in the 1980s, and Holly was pretty much washed up and forgotten. So, I mean, I didn't know Holly in the 60s or 70s, but she hit with the movie Trash. Lou Reed sang about her. She started doing cabaret shows, and she really had a wonderful career. They just recently released one of her later movies. It's called Scarecrow in a Garden of Cucumbers. Have you heard of this?
I have not. Oh my God, that is a crazy cover. I love that.
Well, this movie was found in a vault and lost for over 40 years, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences restored it.
Lovely. Oh, they do such lovely work. They
Isn't
do
that
indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. You lived across the street from where they restore those, because you lived across the street from Television City, didn't you?
No, I lived down the street from
Oh no, Hollywood Production Center.
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah, sorry. And I worked at the Hollywood Production Center once, many moons ago at Gold's Gym. So that's where the UCLA Film Archives is there. And they restore the movies there. I went and watched them restoring one day. It was fabulous.
Oh, that's cool. How do they do it?
They frame by frame, actually. They really do frame by frame. They clean it up, see what's salvageable, what needs to be cut. And if it can be repaired, they repair it. But I was very, very impressed by it, because it's a very labor intense process to restore these movies. So.
Well, I think it's Scarecrow at a Garden of Cucumbers. I mean, full disclosure, it's not a great movie because it doesn't really have much of a plot, but it's a fun movie. And if you go into this movie not expecting a through line story, and just appreciate it for the insanity, wackiness that it is. And what's interesting is, Lily Tomlin makes a cameo in the movie. Bette Midler sings a song.
Wow.
Yeah. And
is it a Warhol film, or is it another?
No, it's not a Warhol film. It was an independent director who never really went anywhere. I forget his name, but the big wonderful surprise in this movie is a woman named Tally Brown. And Tally Brown, there's very little film on her. She was a Broadway actress. She was a really good friend of Holly's. They performed a lot in the cabaret circuit at Reno Sweeney's. And she hung with the Warhol crowd. But she is a force to be reckoned with in this movie.
I love that. I love that. So you grew up in the Midwest, and before we started recording, I complimented Jeff on the fact that his parents were supportive of him, because after college, you were hell-bent on coming to LA to work in the film business, and your parents financed your trip for $1,200. And I love that. I love that. So tell the audience a little bit about your crossing the country and what was involved in that.
Well, my mother really knew that in order for me to fully thrive, I had to leave the Midwest. And she knew it was either going to be New York or Los Angeles. And she encouraged me to, go for the top. Go, don't stick around here and work for a small town newspaper. Because at the time I wanted to be a journalist. So my parents lent me $1,200, and I got into my old beat up Plymouth Volare, and I took off and just was like relentless. And I didn't really stop to sightsee. I didn't stop to sightsee at all. I wanted to get to Hollywood. I just stopped at a motel to go to bed and hit the road the next morning. Well, by the time I got to the Mojave Desert, my car started to overheat. Okay. Now I had learned from a friend of mine in high school, who also drove an old junky car, that when your car started to overheat, what you wanted to do is turn the heater on because that would keep the engine cool. I'm not sure how that works, but it
Me
does.
either, but I have to tell you, reading that, I was so fascinated by it. That's why I asked this question. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I drove through the desert with the heater on. It was horrible. I mean, I
Okay,
remember,
almost on a horse with no name, but okay, go ahead. So
yeah, because I was so drenched. I took my shirt off. I think I even took my pants off because I was just drenched
yep.
in sweat and I was stuck to the vinyl seats. And you know what the at the time I was wearing contact lenses, and so the sweat was getting into my eyes. And by the time I got to Los Angeles, it was getting dark. It was dusk, and I was having a hard time seeing. Uh, I developed an eye infection. So
Oh
by
no.
Yeah, conjunctivitis. So by the time I got to Hollywood, I didn't know where the hell I was going. And I never, we didn't have the internet back then.
No, no, it's the beauty of the thing. You had to discover it on your own. I love
Right.
it.
Right. So, and by the time I got to Hollywood, I realized, oh shoot, where are you going to go? And I was scared because suddenly it was like, well, your car is filled with housewares that your mother made you take because you can't live without bed sheets and you can't live without a
That's
green
true.
trash can for the kitchen. So I thought, oh my God, I'm like a target. People are going to break into my car. They're going to steal all my stuff. There's gang members in Hollywood. What are you going to do? So I saw this big Holiday Inn sign. It was on Highland near Hollywood Boulevard. And I just made a beeline for it. Like, that's
Yep.
where you're going.
Yep.
And
I
so
love that.
yeah, and it was, it was, more than I could afford, but I didn't have a choice because I didn't know where to go and I couldn't see where to go.
I moved to Miami in 1988. Really not quite dissimilar from that, except I already had rented a room from somebody I didn't know in a house I didn't know in a neighborhood I didn't know. But I had the foresight to rent a room.
How did you find the room to rent?
So there was a newspaper in Miami called the TWN, the Weekly News, and it was a gay newspaper. And so I subscribed to it for a month from North Carolina, and I called a few places, and one place was affordable, and it was renting a room in a house with 3 other roommates, and it was a lovely home in Coral Gables. I did not know Coral Gables from a hole in the ground at that point. I came to learn Coral Gables is the nicer section of Miami. If you're going to go somewhere, that's a good place to go. But just as you, I had a little Dodge Colt, and I was pulling a small, tiny U-Haul trailer behind me, but the car was filled to capacity. So when I stopped for my first night in Jacksonville, Florida, I was petrified. Am I going to have to empty the car? But I found one hotel that was nice enough. They had security, and I'm like, okay, maybe it'll be here tomorrow morning. Maybe
Yeah.
not, but it was, thank God. So, and I love the fact that I felt in reading this book that I felt I had a similar path to you, just to a different city. And
Yeah.
so before we started recording, I said to Jeff, that this is so much a coming of age story. It's not about a gay teenager who finds himself. This is about a man who leaves the Midwest, comes to Los Angeles, and I think you found yourself while you were here. Would you think that's a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I grew tremendously, but when you're a gay kid and you're having to embark on a journey to find your dream, right? And I wanted the big mainstream dream. I wanted to work at like CBS Television City.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I didn't want to work. Yeah,
I didn't. I don't want to work in Chatsworth. I want
Right.
to work in Hollywood. There's a difference. If people don't live in Los Angeles, Chatsworth is where porno is made. Hollywood's where regular movies and porno is made. But just so we're clear, but more movies are made in Hollywood than Chatsworth.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
More
here's the crazy
more
thing.
mainstream movies are made in Hollywood.
It's it's funny you mentioned Chatsworth, because what happened was, I was scared to death of Hollywood, and I couldn't get anyone to, I didn't have a rental history. I didn't have a credit rating. I didn't have a California ID. So while my parents lent me $1,200, a bank wouldn't take it so it could be secure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I suddenly found myself, I can't get an apartment. I can't get a bank. I couldn't get a job. I mean, it was a disaster. And so what I wound up doing is I went to a roommate matcher service and I rented a room in Chatsworth.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I did not. Oh, my goodness.
It's
Yes.
not in the book. I actually I wrote about this in a previous draft, but
Okay.
when it went, there was so much heartache and so much struggle before I met Holly that it was distracting from Holly, and it took too long. I mean, Holly didn't come into the book until like page 160 in the original draft,
Right.
right? So now she comes in around page 50. So I cut out about 100 pages
Oh, wow.
of craziness. But that was a very harrowing summer because I wind up in Chatsworth. The serial killer, the Night Stalker, is terrorizing Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, I believe. And I get this room in this really nice condo with this real nice gay guy, right? He's about 20 years older than I am. And I'm moving my stuff in boxes. I don't have any furniture, right? I'm sitting on nothing. And he just says, "Oh, just so you know, I have a really big dick." What the fuck have I gotten myself into?
Oh my God. So I think for the average person who's never lived in Los Angeles, I think it's fair at this point to share that that's a big thing here in LA. People announce the size of their equipment very easily, and I don't know why. I mean, it's as if, I think so many of us come to LA chasing a dream.
Yes.
And I think that so often people mistake a life's dream for, oh, I have to impress you with everything I have. And I'm like, I mean, that's nice. Good for you. But what am I supposed to do with that? Is that going to pay the rent or what?
Right. I was really taken aback because I wasn't interested. I wasn't attracted to him in the least. I mean, and here's the irony. A lot of people, talk about how weird Californians are. And,
right.
Well, this guy was originally from the Midwest. Okay. A lot of people I noticed, or I learned, who were transplants from the South, the Midwest, wherever, they would come to Los Angeles and they would just go apeshit crazy and lose, I don't know if it was lose their sense of self, but they just lost their moral compass. But yet the friends that I knew, who I met through work, who say were born and raised in Burbank or born and raised in Hollywood or Santa Monica, they were the nicest people.
Yes, no, I agree. So I think that, I love living in Los Angeles. I've been here. This is my 26th year. November will be 26 years. I'll have completed 26 years. I think that so many people come here with a dream, and some people come with a fire in their belly, and some come like me who are a little bit lazier and don't really chase the dream and do other things, and it's okay. But I think so many people become disillusioned that their dream didn't come true. And of course, my big thing is, well, did you work at it? I mean, so now I'm going to segue and talk about something you did, because you mentioned it earlier. When you were in high school, you interviewed a lot of really, really, really big stars who came through your town. And I loved that. And I love the fact that your mother was invested in saying, shoot for the moon, Jeff, do it, go for it. And she even helped you on some of those. I loved that.
Right. That was, to me, just so important to write about. The fact that my mother, I didn't, here's how it happened. I was interested in, a friend of mine worked in high school. A friend of mine was a nurse's aide at a nursing home, and she had this old woman she was taking care of who worked in silent films in Hollywood. And so I was going to go over and interview this old lady about what it was like, right? I went over, met her. She was out of her mind. I couldn't remember a damn thing. And I was relaying this to my mother, and my mom said, "Why are you wasting your time with these old biddies in a nursing home? Interview Carol Channing. She's coming to town to perform at the St. Louis Muni Opera. She's going to stay at the Chase Park Plaza. That's where all the stars stay. Go interview her." And I'm like,
I love that. I love that. And then so the audience will know, I'm going to tell a little spoiler. Carol said no, but then you ambushed her, so to speak, at a book signing. And she was lovely until you said something about age.
Well, that was actually Phyllis Diller.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. That's right. Yeah. There's a picture in the book.
That's
sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Carol Channing. What happened was I told my mother, well, I don't know. How am I going to interview Carol Channing? I mean, what are you talking about? I'm a kid. I'm 17 years old. And my mom worked in a flower shop, and she said, "Don't you worry about it. I'm going to come up with something." And she said, you're going to give Carol Channing flowers in a soda bottle. And they're going to be so damn cute. And they're going to stick out from all the big fabulous arrangements she's going to get. She's going to notice the flowers in a soda bottle, and she's going to give you an interview.
Your mother was brilliant.
She could market and sell. She missed her call. She should have been an executive in Chicago.
Well, and I think in reading this book, I also noticed that you took a lot of that to heart when you got here, because you did some very inventive things on trying to get yourself noticed in Hollywood. And I love that. And also with Holly. So because I was so fascinated by your story. I love the stories with Holly. I really do. But I was so fascinated by your growing up and your tenacity of not taking no for an answer that I know I've talked the majority of this about you. But now tell the audience a little bit more about your association with Holly.
With Holly, well, let's see. So, Holly came into my life. It was 1988. So I got to Hollywood in 1985, and I spent 3 years of just struggling, trying to I would get my foot in the door, and I would get these wonderful jobs with great people, but I could not get a break. Like, I wanted to be a writer. I didn't want to be fetching coffee. I wanted to do more than be an assistant, but I got stuck in that production assistant trench, and I couldn't get out of it.
And it's a deep trench, and a lot of people get stuck in it too.
Yeah. It was really, and I met people who had been in that trench for 20 years.
Yes.
And it scared me. It just scared me. So I wound up writing a screenplay, and a friend of mine directed it. He made a movie out of it. It was a bit of a fiasco, but it did wonders for him. Okay.
Good.
And what I learned from this was it wasn't enough to be a writer. You had to be a director. The directors get all the accolades.
Yep.
The writers, they're just tossed to the side from my experience. So I decided I wanted to make my own movie. And I was looking for a star. I thought, well, who are you going to cast in this movie? Who's going to get you a lot of media attention? And so I was invited to a party, and it was at this party where I saw this androgynous being across the way, and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, is this a man or is this a woman? There's just something in us that you kind of want to know. I don't know why that is, but
humans are curious. We're like cats in that we are curious at, well, that's different. Why is it different? And what does it mean to them? And what does it mean to me? It is, I think it's a natural thing.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a good person. And I mean that sincerely, Jeff. If you're not a malicious person, that curiosity is a great thing. If you're malicious, that curiosity is a dangerous thing.
Well, yes. Thank you for clarifying that. You're right. Yeah.
And
So
it's obvious you were coming at it from a good position because, as I've talked about, you had a childhood that trained you to be a good person.
yeah, so I was just curious, and I turned to a friend of mine sitting next to me, and I said, "Who is that person across the way? I'm fascinated." And he said, "Oh, that's Holly Woodlawn. She's an Andy Warhol superstar. Don't mess with her. She's a mess." And that intrigued me even more. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
I'm like, Holly Woodlawn, huh? So I never met Holly that night. But a day later, I was in West Hollywood and I went to the video store. It's called Video West on Larrabee. And in the 80s, there was this little magazine, like the Xerox magazine, gossip rag. It was called The Hollywood Kids. And Holly was on the cover.
Lovely.
She was all dolled up, this beautiful woman. And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is Holly Woodlawn." So I picked it up, I cracked it open, I read her interview, I learned all about her. And then I went home that night and I thought, Holly, this is who you should make a movie with. And so I didn't know how to get in touch with Holly. So I called the operator. Back in those days, you'd call 411.
1-1. That's right.
And it was information. And I said, "Hi, do you have a number for Holly Woodlawn?" And she said, "Hollywood who?" And I said, "Holly Woodlawn," right? Because everyone called her Hollywood.
Right.
A lot of, right. And surprisingly, Holly was listed. And so I called Holly up and I coerced her into going out to dinner with me.
I love
That's how we met.
I love that. And then so that was the honeymoon period. Then there was the marriage period. Then there was a divorce period. But then at the end, there was a reconciliation, both in life and afterlife. And that was so wonderful. Do you feel like you can share that ending or not?
I don't know if I can. It's such a wonderful point.
Well, you know what? I don't think you should share it, Jeff. I should say how much it impressed me because I am a believer in the. So when I read the end of the story, I was 100% supportive because I'm like, that is what I would wish for in this type of situation. So I think everyone should read the book and be either a believer or a non-believer, but they should read the book and figure out if they are a believer or a non-believer in the way this ended. How's that?
That sounds good. I will say that ending, I mean, it blew me away, and it gave me the end of my book.
It does, and it gave this reader a satisfied feeling because, look, I have been star adjacent more than once in my life, not necessarily movie stars, but mostly in the music world. And they are highs and lows. They're just like us. They put on their pants one leg at a time. But their experiences, especially if we're chasing a similar experience, become very important to us. But I have found sometimes there comes a splitting of the paths, and that's not always the best. And it's always sad, but I love the way yours had such a satisfying ending to it. I celebrate that for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I felt like so much stuff went down between me and Holly, stuff that I couldn't control, stuff that was caused by other people, stuff that, I feel like finally it was like she came back to me, the Holly that I adored, the Holly that I lost, because when we went through what's the divorce period, that's when I lost my best friend. And it was tragic, for me.
Well, of course, and it had to have been because you two had so much invested together as far as being friends. You had lives that were, intertwined. And to have that kind of divorce must have been traumatic for you.
It was awful. It was an awful catastrophic. Well, I don't want to say, too, not really catastrophic. Well, for me personally, it was a personal
Yeah,
catastrophe.
well, yes, I can. Well, I mean, that's what I saw reading the book. I felt betrayed in some ways for you because I have been in a situation that was similar in some ways. You know, you have a best friend and then there's a separation, and all of a sudden your best friend is now not your best friend anymore, and you have to adjust your life accordingly. That's not always easy. That is traumatic, I think.
Well, what happened in your situation?
So I was friends with a woman who she's a fabulous singer. She's one of the best singers I know. She was on a reality show. She did well. She did not win. But we did a lot of shows together, and I helped produce some of them. And she got angry at me before a show because I called her out on some of her bullshit. And she turned against me. I mean, 180 degrees. She went from being my best friend to being a nightmare, truthfully. And I was standing in the wings watching the show, and then when she turned on me, and it was so obvious to everyone in the show that she was now against me, and I was like, wow, it's so easy for you, but you were my best friend, but I guess not anymore. And it took me many years to get over it because I was like, and all I remember is my mother saying, it doesn't matter how pretty the snake is, it's still a snake and it's going to bite you. And I watched her bite friend after friend. And when she bit me, I was genuinely surprised. But at the end of the day, I've come to reconcile it. I've seen her in the last year, I think, maybe somewhere along in there. And I feel sorry for her because what I realize is she's her own biggest enemy, just like Holly was at the end. Every time she's been presented with success, she has managed to fuck it up. Pardon my language. She's managed to screw it up and to sabotage it. That's the word I'm looking for. And I'm like, I feel for her because we're both at that age. She's 3 years older than I am. She's never going to be a big star. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. Well,
she should have been a big star, and like you, I felt like I was trying to help, which you're a Pisces just like I am. And I when you revealed that in the book, I was like, oh Jesus, I know where this is going. Because that's what we do. We're fixers.
Yeah.
Helpers.
I think I had a real problem with being codependent.
Me too. Thanks for the therapy, Jeff. This has been great.
It's really hard to come to terms with that. And
I'm a people pleaser, which is a big thing with codependency. But I also feel, to pat myself on the back, I feel like I'm a nice person and I want the best for my friends. I don't care who they are. If you're a friend of mine, I want the very best for you. That is my goal. I will, if I can give you a hand up or a leg up, I'm willing to do that. And I will put myself second, which is something I've been working on in the last 10 years, is trying to remember my lane is my lane, and I should be at the front of my lane, not in the back of your lane. That's why I do this podcast, because I love doing this podcast. I feel like our conversation has been wonderful. I feel like if it gives you a leg up, that's great. It gives me a leg up because I like what I'm doing. So,
Well, it's funny that because I think you hit the nail on the head, right? About the lane. I think I was in Holly's lane for so long. I mean, this is the book that we wrote together, and it's Holly Woodlawn with Jeff Copeland, and I chose to do the with, not understanding how it was going to affect me in the end. But
though, so I will say that when I read that, what I realized was you didn't want to take away from her star. You were saying, I am with Holly, whereas the and would have been a better financial position for you in the long run.
I think it would have kind of solidified my contribution.
Yes.
Where what happened was, a lot of people, I think, got the impression. I mean, there were people like Michael Dennedy, my editor, or our editor, our agent, Robert Drake. I mean, they knew the heavy lifting that I was doing.
Sure.
But people who came in later and were trying to get the movie rights to that story, I mean, as far as they was concerned, I just took dictation.
Yep.
I was a secretary.
Yep. Well, and it's funny because I've interviewed several people who have been, like Reed Farrell Coleman wrote in the Robert B. Parker series, and Marshall Karp wrote with James Patterson. But, I know both Reed and Marshall very well, and I know their role in these books, and it's 100%. And so when I read that when you were talking about it should have been and instead of with, I understood, because it's like, okay, if you're doing all the writing, it should say Jeff Copeland because you did the writing. But when Hollywood or a publisher wants someone's name attached to it, they're going to get what they want first.
Right. Hey, I got a quick question. Did you, on the version you read, did it have Simon Doonan's introduction? About
yes, it did. Yes. So a funny thing, I couldn't find the PDF, so I actually bought the finished copy this morning on Amazon. So it's funny. I should have told you this before. In your email, it says, "Can you open it?" Well, I opened a few of the videos, but I don't think there was a PDF attached to it. So I bought it this morning because I'm the fool that waits to the last minute to read a book, So it's always fresh in my mind. So I finished it about 12 minutes before we started our conversation.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yes, I torture myself, Jeff. I can't.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, I love it. I mean, the thing is, this is probably more than the audience will ever need to know, but I always torture myself before every interview because I want to do a good job. I'm a people pleaser, and I want to like the people I interview. So, I'm always at the last minute reading like this, but it was so wonderful. I enjoyed it. So yes, it did have the forward.
I love that forward because I felt like it was a great setup to my story.
Yes.
And I love Pat Ass. I don't know if you've ever seen Pat Ass movies. She's a bit player in some movies, but she was wonderful. And I just thought it was really interesting. And it gave another dimension to LA in the 80s when he's talking about Duke's Coffee Shop in West Hollywood. And this stuff doesn't exist anymore,
No.
So I really wanted Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn to be a celebration of not just Holly, but of Los Angeles and a very specific time in Hollywood.
It was. And, one of the things that I liked so much about it was, as I said earlier, it's a coming of age story for you. And you as the storyteller show us your life and your intersection with different people. And that was so important because it was so heartfelt, Jeff. And I mean, you are an amazing writer. I mean, truthfully, I could say I wasn't sure what I would get, because when you read someone's story of how they interacted with someone else, you never really know what you're going to get from an author, but your writing is tight and it's good. And I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, thank you very much. That means so much to me. I'm thrilled to hear that. Thank you.
Yes. Once again, the book is called Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn. I'm going to screw it up one way or another. Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn. There you go. So I enjoyed this so much, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my gosh, it was a delight. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Hang on for me just a minute. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.